you might have one of the longest standing, continuously run big bands in New York.
Probably.
When did you start the band?
Okay, started the band about after I was in Manhattan for 2 years. I came here as in 1977. In the beginning of 1977, I mainly came here as a tenor player, and I had composed, but I hadn't really started arranging yet. But I wanted to be like my heroes were Dave Liebman, Steve Grossman, and Mike Brecker. And then one night I went to the Vanguard to hear Woody Shaw, and Woody Shaw had a 4-horn band, and I thought, I think I could do that because I was always interested in arranging, just never enough to actually do anything about it. So I thought, I think I could do that. And I thought, well, I got some pretty cool songs I wrote. And then I hooked up with an arranger friend of mine named Dave LaLama. Okay, no, I was playing in his band at the time. So I was learning a lot from him, asking him a lot of questions. And there was another, as a trumpet player, who was an arranger who wrote really well, named Tim We Met. I don't know if you ever met Tim We Met, but anyway, so I would just had all these questions, and I went out and bought a Don Sebesky book on how to arrange, but it was way over my head. So I put a band together, doing my own material for the most part, and just started from scratch. And that was the beginning of my arranging. And eventually, a friend of mine was playing, got the gig with Buddy Rich, and he says, Ed, Buddy Rich is always looking for material. Why don't you put a big band together and write something for a big band? Maybe I can get it on this band. So long story short, I put a band together, finally got some charts to Buddy Rich, and he didn't like any of them. So,
Sure.
so that's the beginning of my band.
Yeah. What was the first band that you put together when you were
The
starting to
first band
arrange
was a
stuff?
9-piece band.
Okay. What was the instrumentation?
And the instrumentation was, piano, guitar, bass, drums, and 5 horns. And that was, let me see, tenor sax, bari sax, alto sax. I think I may have switched to alto at that point, or was I playing tenor? I forget. No, that's right. I was playing tenor sax. That doesn't matter. Trumpet, trombone. 3 saxes, trumpet, trombone.
Yeah, that's a good place to start because with 5 horns,
Yeah.
you got a lot to work with. But
Totally.
the difference between 5 horns or 6 horns and a 17-piece band is a pretty substantial leap.
Yeah, it really is. I don't remember exactly how when I started arranging for the big band. I don't remember exactly what the obstacles were, but it all became just trial and error. That's I would record all the rehearsals on a Walkman. Do you know what that is?
Sure. Oh yeah.
So I would just take it home. I was living by myself at the time, and I was really living hand to mouth. I was just started playing with Tito Puente.
Okay.
And for $25 a night. But believe it or not, we worked 7 nights a week, so I was able to actually pay the rent. But I didn't have an actual table. So I had what they call a card table. You know what a card table is? They're like fold-out tables.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Oh, in terms of an actual, yeah.
So I did afford myself an acoustic piano. So all I did was arrange all the time. I'd rehearse once a week and then take the cassette tape home and just pour over it, figure out, okay, I have to change that, Total trial and error. Now, whether that's the best way to learn or not, maybe it might be reasonable to ask, Ed, why don't you just get a teacher, But I taught myself how to play the saxophone. I figured I'll teach myself how to arrange. So.
Sure. Did you go to school for music?
I did. I went to a place called DePaul University, and it was a classical school.
Okay.
So I didn't take any jazz. I never took a jazz lesson from anybody.
Interesting.
So I completely taught myself the way and this will probably would be able to segue into the actual reason we're doing this interview about improvisation.
Sure.
One of the few correct things I did in my life was I decided to learn how to play jazz by transcribing.
Yeah.
One of the things that we'll probably get into later on is that the idea of starting with music theory is ass backwards.
Yeah.
First, you learn the language of jazz. And the way you learn the language of jazz is by listening and transcribing, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure,
you know. I remember a long time ago when Wynton Marsalis was just starting out and going out on his own, right after he was with Blakey, and he was doing these interviews. Now he's a tremendous musician, and I think he's probably done a lot for jazz. But he just said something that I thought, oh my God, this is so wrong. He goes, "Don't transcribe." His thing was, "Don't transcribe."
Interesting.
I thought, what? How else are you going to learn the language if you don't?
Right,
But anyway,
of course.
but the point being that I transcribed, and through then transcribing and then just playing the transcriptions, it was then I realized, oh, okay, I learned a theory that way.
Sure.
In the same way, when a baby or toddler starts learning how to talk,
Yeah.
the first thing you don't teach them, like, you don't get a little kid linguistic book out.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do it by copying, and that's
Right.
how I learned how to play jazz. And like I said, it's one of the few things that I look back at my life and go, "Wow, I did that right."
Yeah.
And now I teach theory, and but I'm always mindful that for the students that it actually matters, who really want to become jazz musicians, I always make sure that I don't teach them anything about the modes. I tell them the modes exist.
Sure.
But don't start noodling around a Lydian scale, before you hear where it's supposed to be.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And it gives it a context, and once you start dealing with modes or whatever, okay, this is what it's supposed to sound like. And on top of that, I mean, there's no possible way to learn swing from a book. Sometimes you see on sheet music for people who aren't jazz musicians, it'll be like, 2/8 equals whatever. But unless you're listening to the Basie Band or you're listening to Art Blakey's swing, there's no way you can get the same feel out of it. And the feel counts for as much as the notes or for anything else like that.
Totally.
And I use the same analogy all the time when I talk to my students who are trying to learn how to play. And it's like, there's no way, in the beginning, you just have to try stuff out as an improviser. You just have to try to experiment with it. And I always think of the same thing. It's just like if we took a baby and the baby starts going, you go, no, wait, none of that. We got to get the grammar straight before we start making any sounds here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's the same principle of like, you have to try something out. I think that seems to me to be the right approach, and it's the approach that everybody's taken through time. I mean,
I think so.
There were no books when Dizzy Gillespie was trying to learn how to play.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
right.
That is all transcription. It's all learning. In that regard, it's almost a folk art. We think about it as being like kind of highfalutin stuff now, but it's a music that, even despite being as let's say intellectual as it is, comes from its roots in being party music or being.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree.
So after thinking, okay, I'll write this stuff and I'll work out the material in the big band as the potential that it might be played elsewhere. Then there had to be was that your incentive to then continue to write, is to say, let me work on this process? Or was it?
Well, actually, it's funny because even though the prospect of getting Buddy Rich to do my music, that just fell by the wayside, because at that point I became obsessed with just arranging for the big band.
Sure.
And then we did with the 9-piece band. I probably did a couple gigs, but once I put the big band together, I never looked back. Never did the 9-piece band again.
Interesting.
And so then it was from there that we did a handful of gigs just around town, door gigs, and then we hit it big by playing a club called 7th Avenue South, which was owned in part by the Brecker brothers.
Okay.
So I got to know them, and we landed an every Monday night thing there that lasted for 3 years.
Oh wow. When was this?
That was 1979.
Okay.
And so 79.
This is every Monday night.
Every Monday night. Every Monday night. Every now and then they'd bounce us. If Jocko wanted to come in with his big band or anything.
Sure, yeah.
They would bounce us. And then eventually what happened was Gil Evans was coming out of retirement, and then they booted us for Gil. which is fine. You know
that's all right. If you got to get booted by anybody,
exactly
that's
right.
okay.
That's exactly right. You know what? It's like, yep, it's yours. Just take it. I didn't earn this anyway. So I learned to write, because at the time, the 3 years we played 7th Avenue South, I was rehearsing the band once a week and then doing the gigs. I was writing constantly. Now, I
Sure.
think at that point, I had left Tito Puente and was doing club dates on weekends.
Okay.
So that afforded, and so now I had all weekdays and weeknights just to arrange, do the
Sure.
trial and error method. And so I was writing like crazy, obsessively writing. And I was so lucky because I had a venue to play it in,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
But now, the down, if there's, I don't know if it's the downside or not, but I assume with a high profile venue like 7th Avenue South was, that I just expected we were going to get a lot more out of it than we actually did.
Mhm.
We never, I was expecting maybe a record company saying, "Yeah, we want to sign you." No, I ended up doing a record, actually vinyl back in the day,
Sure.
that I had to ask my father to loan me some money to do.
Mhm.
So, even though it was a high profile venue, the band never really rose above just playing there.
Sure.
It just didn't, you know.
But it has to be a good. I mean, that's an amazing way to just get used to and try different things out and get used to
No, it's
writing. I mean,
it
to,
is-
to have
it is
that
the greatest.
deadline. Yeah.
It was the incredible experience. It was just incredible experience, especially for someone like me who refused to actually get a teacher.
Sure.
I just wanted to teach myself, like I taught myself how to play jazz.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's
you-
how I wanted to learn.
Sure. Did you buy scores and things like that? Look stuff up and just try to figure it out.
Yeah, when I first moved to New York, one of the things I did while my first year I moved to New York, I didn't work at all. All I did was made jam sessions. And so during the day, if I wasn't jamming with someone, I was going to the Lincoln Center Library,
Mhm.
and I was checking out classical scores because I
Sure.
was real into classical music, and I just wanted to learn about composition and orchestrating.
Mhm.
But I also had I went out and because I was broke, pathetic because I hadn't even started working with Tito Puente yet.
Mhm.
So I was just living on whatever I made when I was in Chicago. And which wasn't much. I only came here a couple $1,000, but
Sure. And that's where you went to school?
DuPont University.
Yeah, it was in Chicago. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
So anyway, so I was studying like crazy and listening, taking records out too, and then just like following the scores along. But I was able to buy Big Dipper, Thad's chart.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
And so now I had just gotten the gig with Tito. So what I would bring the score, and during the breaks, I would just be, just looking at the score and figure, okay, he's doubling this note here, he's doubling this. I mean, I was going way too into depth, and I just realized it was just, look at every section as a thing in itself. It's that simple. So anyway, you learn all these when you finally start actually arranging,
Sure. And that's the advantage to being able to do it all the time, to being able to try different things out and do it by trial and error. Instead of saying to yourself, well, let me kill myself over the sort of minutia of how somebody might do this or not. But if you're in that mindset too, that's what you want, is to be super meticulous so that you learn the stuff so that, you have that leeway.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't hurt to be able to run through and, whatever, check out the way that different people are writing.
Mhm.
So now your band is a little different in instrumentation in that you have, instead of 4 trumpets, you've got 2 trumpets.
Mhm.
Instead of 4 trombones, you've got 3 trombones.
Yeah.
And then instead of whatever else, you've got rock guitar and 2 keyboards. And I mean, then it gets a little wild. But what was the thought process behind doing the different horn section?
Initially, we had 4 trumpets.
Mhm.
Okay. But we always had 3 trombones. And the reason why we had 3 trombones, because Buddy Rich only had 3 trombones.
Ah, okay.
The guy who played with him, at least he did when my friend worked with Buddy Rich. And so that's why we only had 3 trombones.
Sure.
And I never added a 4th. Okay, just stuck with the 3 trombones. The 4 trumpets, that's a little dicey what happened there. I had 4 trumpets since the beginning for many years. And then my trumpet section, my 4-piece trumpet section, I just didn't think they played well together. And I decided, and then one of the people, one of the players wasn't hardly making any rehearsals. At this point, we were playing the Zappa stuff at the Bottom Line. The Bottom Line is a nightclub in Greenwich Village that we played there for 9 years. We played the Zappa stuff every 2 months for 9 years. So I had 4 trumpets there, but the trumpet players were calling in subs all the time. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to, because we always have a space problem on stage. I'm going to, do I really need 4 trumpets? Now, because part of the thought process was, and I'm sure you're going to disagree with this aspect.
We'll see.
I don't like the sound of trumpet solos. I just don't. They're like bumblebees or something swarming around.
I don't disagree with you.
I just don't like it. I love sax solos. I love trombones when they're playing. I love it. But 4-part harmony in trumpets is something I've never particularly liked.
Sure.
So, but the only reason I had misgivings about only using 2 trumpets as opposed to 4, because I love this guy Fela Kuti.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Fela's music changed my life.
Sure.
And I said, and of course, his band was always miserably out of tune, but still the greatest music. And their out of tuneness was almost fantastic.
Yeah.
For that music. So I was really getting into Fela. So I think to myself, God, man, the only thing I miss with the 4 trumpets to this day is the unisons. That's the only thing I miss.
Okay.
Yeah. And if the whole band is playing like a chord, it'd be nice to have maybe a couple, the trumpets 3 and 4, to fill out, maybe fill out a little bit, but you don't really need it. So I figured, good. We have more space on the stage, and I'm happy that that's what happened. Now, the reason I said it was dicey before is because I had to fire. I had a 4-piece trumpet section, and I fired everyone except Ronnie.
Okay.
And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm going to come off like a total douchebag to anyone who watches this.
I think that's fine.
Okay? Because it's one of the things I'm very, I don't want to say ashamed of, that I'm embarrassed by. But the type of person I am is like, I don't try to hide from it. I own it. That I fucked up, okay? And that is, I fired 2 of the 3 by way of their voicemail. Horrible thing to do. I just wanted, it was like ripping off a Band-Aid. I wanted to just get it over and done with.
Yeah.
Horrible thing to do. And and then there's a person who I did talk to on the phone. Because I'm thinking, what do you do when you fire somebody? You're supposed to take them out to dinner, and
right. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to figure out how to navigate that kind of situation.
It really is. But at least the person who I fired talking over the phone, I don't feel guilty about that. But the other 2, I really do feel guilty to this day.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just like, they had been with me for years, and that's the way I treat them. So I'm not proud of that, but but that's the reason that we have 4 trumpets. And now when we did our first gig at the Bottom Line doing the Zappa stuff, that was in 1994, and I only had my piano player Bob Quaranta, and Ted Cushion was a guy who used to jam with all the time, and so my brother was in the audience that night. He goes, man, the band needs something else. Needs some kind of percussive thing, like just for, the double. I forget how he put it, but I thought to myself, you're right. So Ted joined the band then.
Sure.
So he only missed like that first gig at the Bottom Line. So that's why we have 2 keyboard players, one acoustic and one sampler.
Sure. And did he always do electric keyboard? Yeah. And for the Zappa stuff, you need it. I mean, it works, especially with all the marimba sounds and any of the other color to it. It's a little bit easier to do that than to have a whole mallet section or something like
Now,
that. You know,
but so, on the other hand, some people might say, well, you need a guitar player. People used to say at first we didn't have a guitar player for years, no guitar player, and so of course some people say, oh, it needs guitar, it needs guitar. Well, only if I'm trying to sound exactly like Zappa,
Right.
You know, the only reason I got guitar like now is because Bruce happens to play guitar.
Sure.
You know, and also I added to the color of the arrangements, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's the reason for the instrumentation.
Sure. Was Bruce the first guitar player? Because I know you had a singer before.
We had the first guitarist started out just as a singer. His name was Carl Restivo, and I did have a couple guests who played with us. A guy named Gary Lucas played. He used to play with Cat and Beefheart. So he was a guest of ours.
Sure.
You know, we've had a couple guitar player guests, but as far as being in the band, Carl Restivo, he was a young guy who I had met, and I mean, young now he's probably around 40, but he was like 20 when I met him. You know, so he was a really good singer, and he played really good guitar. And then when he moved out to California, right around then, I had just met Bruce McDaniel, and then I was happy to see that Bruce was really loved my band, but he also happened to be one of the best musicians I've ever met. He's just like,
sure.
I mean, I rely on him for a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so. You know, so that's basically the story of the band.
Yeah, pretty good. This might be a good time. Give me an idea of some of the people who've come through there, because you've had a ton of people come through that band, and it seems to me it's always a super high quality. I mean, it's a serious operation.
Well, you know, one of the people that was in the band for a while was Tom Harrell.
Okay,
and which is really interesting, just because he's such a unique person.
Sure. Yeah.
And he. One time we used to rehearse in top of a deli on like 51st Street and 7th Avenue.
Okay.
A friend of mine had this loft, and so we'd go on top of this deli, and Tom was he's got I don't know if it calls it bipolar, but it's schizophrenia, I believe. You know, so here's voices.
Sure.
And so, you know, everyone, and probably everyone watching this video here probably knows about Tom's story, at least to that extent.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Tom would be, you know, when it came time, you know, people would get there early just to hang, but then came time to do the music, I'd have to go into the bathroom because Tom would be like in the shower stall, just trembling. He was so afraid just to go out and, you know, join the others.
Sure.
But once the music started, then all of a sudden, all that went away. He was just, I mean, he didn't become like this incredibly gregarious person, but he was cool. He'd read great. His solos were mind-blowing. But the thing interesting about Tom Harrell, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but the thing that I was fascinated by is like after rehearsal, when we would talk about improvisation and how to deal with certain changes, he talked almost normal. He still had that peculiar way that he speaks.
Sure,
but he was really just totally engaged.
Yeah.
Once you were talked about music.
Yeah.
You know, I can even show you if I can get on the piano. Can we do that?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
And I should put this over here?
Yeah, sure.
All right, okay. I don't know if this is going to be.
I'll move it around.
Okay.
We're making it up as we go.
On my new album, A Lousy Day in Harlem, we do a song called Like Lee Morgan.
Yeah.
And the vamp at the end is a B flat minor, C minor, A flat minor, the B flat minor. Okay? Now, of course, it's got a walking bass line and it's fast. And so, anyway, so Tom Harrell, he got the solo on it, and he would solo on that vamp. And so we were talking about how to deal with that because I was trying to figure out myself on the gigs where I was going to solo on that, right?
Sure.
So of course we start with B flat minor 9. We're all minor 9 chords, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I realized that if generally what you do is B flat Dorian on that, and then of course you would think, well, then C Dorian. Well, no, that's. I guess you could do that, but it always sounded funny to me.
Yeah.
It's always sounded funny. I said, no, I got to stick with the B flat Dorian, and it would never occur to me had I just took a completely academic approach.
Sure. Yeah.
And if I took the approach of what sounds good and what doesn't sound good, I realized, no, man. Especially at the tempo we're doing, boom, 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 I can't play that fast.
Right.
At the tempo, I realized, no, that C minor, I got to ignore that, right? Now, we go to A flat minor, which does sound good with A flat Dorian, but when you go back to B flat minor, it does go back to B flat Dorian as far as what sounds good.
Sure.
In other words, when it goes back to B flat Dorian, you don't take the same approaches you did before when you went up. The A flat Dorian, when I went up back to B flat minor, it's not like I kept playing A flat Dorian because that would sound funny.
Right. Yeah.
That would sound weird. So anyway, so Tom and I would discuss this, and he was just fascinated with questions like that. And here's a story. I haven't thought about this since. I'm hoping that anyone who watches this gets something out of it that you learn from my cautionary tales.
Sure. Yeah.
And something like this happened twice to me. I was given an opportunity, more than twice. I was given an opportunity, and I chickened out. And the opportunity was because Tom Harrell was playing with Phil Woods at the time. And Tom Harrell, when he was playing with us, doing the rehearsals with us, he says, hey, man, write a song for Phil. And I chickened out. And I never did. I never did because I just chickened out.
Really?
Yep. Edgar Winter once said to me, hey, we should write together. And I never did because I chickened out. And when I first came to New York, I came here, like I told you, I came here as a tenor player. I had the opportunity to audition for Horace Silver's band. The Horace Silver's band, that was, because I used to go, when I was in college, one of my main influences was Mike Brecker. And I used to go see, every time they came to town, when Mike Brecker would be playing with Horace, I'd always go see him. I bought all of Horace albums, and then I finally was given the opportunity. I chickened out. So don't be like me.
But was the thinking that it was too daunting a task in some regard?
Yeah.
Wow,
everything was just too daunting. It was yeah.
But it's surprising for some. I mean, it would seem to me that the daunting task is to sit around and write constant big band charts and try to put it together for a regular gig like that.
You know what? When you're writing, no one's judging you. Of course, what they do when you perform.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with the big time. Okay, first off, I came here as a tenor player, and so that's why I was intimidated to go, to audition for Horace. But eventually, I had become so sick and tired of trying to sound like Mike Brecker when I realized that I was never going to ever be that good, and I would have to devote all my life to being doing nothing but that.
Right.
Because my focus was mainly getting into writing at that time anyway.
Sure.
And I realized, what? As much as I love Mike Brecker and Liebman and Grossman, the one who always gave me the most happiness was Cannonball.
Sure.
So I decided, well, I'm going to be a writer. I don't want to completely give up playing the saxophone. I figured I'm going to go back to playing alto because that's what I did when I was in college. So I started on alto. And before getting into the tenor guys that I got into, I was super into Cannonball, like all of the time. And this is actually going to be a good segue into the conversation of improvisation.
Sure.
One of the things I did when I decided to go back to the alto saxophone, I went. This is still in the days of cassettes. Okay, so I decided, probably in the early '80s. Yeah, definitely the early '80s. I was going to go to my oldest brother's place, and he had the biggest record collection of anyone I've ever known. So he had his turntable hooked up to a cassette, so you could you record albums.
Yeah.
So here's the second thing I did in my life, which turned out to be the best thing I ever did, besides the transcribing in the beginning.
Yeah.
I got all these Cannonball albums that he had, and he had a ton of them. And I had the tape. I would press record and put the needle only on his solos.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So now, and the melodies and his solos.
Yeah.
I totally skip over Nat
Sure.
Because what I wanted to do was have on this cassette just one Cannonball solo after another. One after another. If you do that, and then of course I'm in my car, going to club dates, whatever, and all day long, all I'm doing is listening to these cassette tapes of nothing but Cannonball.
Sure.
Now, why is that a good thing? To this day, there are certain things that I play that are so strongly influenced by Cannonball. It's never been, since I'm mainly a writer, it's never been one of these things where I got to find myself as a player.
Okay.
I've never known an alto player that swung as hard as Cannonball, and that includes
It'd be hard to find.
Yeah, it'd be hard to find, and that includes Bird. And I will let anyone completely just tell me I'm full of it. Go right ahead. I maintain that Cannonball, his swing was harder than Bird's. Sorry.
Yeah.
But, that's what I think. But, what am I, the arbiter of swing? So you could tell me I'm full of shit. I completely,
I won't argue with you.
But anyway, I figured what I want to do as a saxophone player is try to come close to swinging that. I probably will never achieve it, but I get closer to it every time I practice.
Sure.
I get closer to it. And and when I do that, then I'm happy with what I play.
Just in terms of just swinging, just trying to swing.
Just trying to swing.
Yeah.
Just trying to swing, because it's a lot more, you really swing. And I know a lot of players who are really good players who don't have that kind of bounce. I always call it a bounce for some reason.
Sure.
I don't know why. But there's something like my friend Chuck Wilson. He was an alto player, big influence on me. He's my first lead alto player in my big band. Just passed away recently, but he's Cannonball fanatic. He got to actually hang with Cannonball because he was in North Texas State, and Cannonball brought Nat and his quintet down there to do like a master class in concert. So Chuck had the job of driving Cannonball around.
Oh,
and so anyway, and he said Cannonball was like the nicest human being ever. But anyway, be that as it may. So I would listen to these cassette tapes over and over again, and just fascinated. Just absolutely fascinated with what I'm hearing. You got to keep in mind, this is me getting into Cannonball in the second phase. The first phase is when I first started going to college. Cannonball, Jack McLean, and Phil Woods, they were the guys I mainly listened to.
Sure.
Yeah. But it was Cannonball I was always most intrigued with. And then when I went to maybe in my second or third year of college, when I went to see Elvin play at the Jazz Showcase, and he brought Steve Grossman. Liebman had already left Elvin to play with Miles, so he came to town. Elvin came to town with Grossman and Frank Foster.
Okay.
So anyway, now there's this new way of playing jazz that I had never heard before. Now, with Grossman?
Uh-huh.
Now, then my brother Nick told me, my oldest brother, the one with the big record collection, he goes, "Oh man, you got to hear Live at the Lighthouse. Live at the Lighthouse."
Yeah.
That's at Liebman and Grossman. And I got it. And that changed my life at that time. I just pretty much gave up playing alto, and I played tenor. Started transcribing that stuff.
Sure.
And of course, my Brecker was coming into town, and Mike was playing completely out of that style.
Sure.
Mike had his own thing because Mike had a little more rock and roll in him than and more R&B than Liebman or Grossman.
Yeah.
But still, that mid '60s Coltrane thing before Trains got into the avant-garde.
Right.
Doing those albums like Out of This World and stuff like that, which I didn't know at the time because I didn't know those Train albums, but I didn't realize that that's where Liebman and Grossman that's where they were getting their stuff from, was Train.
Sure.
That period of Train.
Yeah.
So so then I started listening to Train of that period. So I was real into that. And then eventually when I got to New York and I decided that I wasn't happy playing tenor anymore, and I went back to playing alto. Now, and that's when I started making those cassette tapes of Cannonball. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I always come back to is the fact that in jazz music and in improvised music, you can always every time you go back to those old recordings that you knew before, you're coming at it with a new perspective.
That's exactly right.
And it's kind of amazing that, I mean, I go back and take out records that I listened to endlessly in high school or something like that and just hear it in a completely new way now.
Totally.
And to be able to come at it from that perspective of like, okay, well, now I'm coming from a already a post-Liebman world. Let me go back to Cannonball and check that stuff out. And it's an endless process. It's kind of amazing. So when you came to New York, what did you think of yourself as being? I'm going to be a saxophone player. I'm going to play. Like, what did you think your career, your path was going to be?
I can tell you right off the bat. I alluded to it before. My path was going to be. I was going to be in the same realm of those people that play with, Elvin was going to call me, Horace Silver was going to call me. I was going to completely do the route of Liebman and Grossman and Brecker.
Sure.
That's what I was going to do. I was going to be one of those guys. Now, as soon as I got here, the competition wasn't all that great in Chicago.
Okay.
So I could actually go around thinking I was really good.
Yeah.
And I come to New York, and now I've got people who also aren't famous like those guys, but they're better than me. And I'm realizing, because keep in mind, I'm 21 at this point. I first moved here, I was 21 years old. I realized, and I'm being brutally honest about myself, I realized some really just bad things, that I came here with no time. I had no sense of rhythm.
Interesting.
I was able to graduate college and become a pretty I won't say important, but I was a guy that was respected in Chicago. Now, but I realized just when I would like take myself at these jam sessions, I'm thinking something's wrong, and I realized I'm nowhere near the beat. And I realized, and I look back, the reason why I can tell you this, and trying to find anyone who's going to be this brutally honest about themselves, because as you know, the worst thing that you could say about a jazz musician is that he's a no time, no swinging motherfucker.
Sure.
But that was me, and I had people that were actually trying to tell me that. Ralph Lalama was one of them. And because he came to town the same time I did, and we used to go to jam sessions. And there was another guy named Jerry Vermola. Jerry Vermola was a Liebman, Grossman fanatic. Ralph was totally into Sonny Rollins and Hank Mobley. Now, Ralph was better than both of us. But then there was also another guy that didn't hang with us, but he was also just came to New York, and his name's Richard Perry.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Now, Richard Perry, I hope I didn't get in trouble for saying this. Richard Perry was better than all of us. And still is.
Sure.
But Ralph Lalama is fantastic. He is absolutely, I love how Ralph plays.
Yeah.
But so that's not a put down to him.
Right.
But Richard Perry was something special, and still is.
Sure.
I defy you to find a tenor sound that's more beautiful than Richard Perry. I mean, it's just like, but anyway, be that as it may. But all these guys, one thing they all had in common was that they were swinging.
Yeah.
In their time, and I just never put that. I realized I put all of my practice time into chops. And,
Sure.
And I could play over exchanges.
Yeah.
But what's it mean if you're not swinging?
Right.
And so, of course, so then I started, but it took me years to find a beat. It really did. I had a good ear from the get-go. But some people are born without legs and arms or something. I was born without a beat. I was born without a natural instinct for rhythm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now, how do you overcome that? Because that is not an easy. You can learn harmony and you can learn rhythm.
That's exactly right.
And you can learn tone, or rather, you can learn like harmonic concepts or whatever. But the time thing is tricky.
Well, it's only tricky if that's a deficit of yours.
Well, what I mean is learning it.
How do I learn it?
How do you build that up?
Well, okay. I just try to concentrate on it more. I would say that I haven't conquered it. I would say that I'm really just still doing what I always do, which was just feel it. I'm just feeling it better.
Mm-hmm.
But to this day, you could catch me if for one thing, when I conduct my band, if there's no rhythm section going on, and if I'm just conducting the brass or the saxophone without a drummer keeping the time, if someone slows down a little bit, I'll follow them. So it's still there. I mean, in that sense, it's still there. You can also catch me if we're jamming and all of a sudden the rhythm section just stops playing and it's stop time. I have made a fool of myself so many times back in the day. If you do it now, I would do a better job, but I probably still would slow down or speed up,
Okay.
So it's not, because my excuse always is, hey, I'm a writer.
Yeah,
I'm a writer. But the fact of the matter is, I do want to conquer this thing.
Right.
But not enough to do what I really have to do, which is spend 8 hours a day with a metronome. And whether you believe in the metronome or not, I think it definitely has its purpose. And
Sure.
I've never used one hardly ever in my life, because the truth hurts. But
that's metronome's job, is to keep you honest.
That's exactly right. He's exactly right. But when my older daughter went to college to be a bass player, I always told her, use a metronome. Use a metronome. Don't be like me.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it's good that I say this and be this self-deprecating about myself, because, when I first started teaching, there was one of my students came in. He was in one of my ensembles. He played guitar. And he's one of these guys, when he would tap his foot, he'd be all over the place. And he had really bad time. So he got there early to a rehearsal once. I said, listen, I want to talk to you. I said, listen. I said, you had the same problem I have. I said, you don't have natural rhythm. So I'm telling you, you got to focus on that, And I think I probably told him that you use a metronome, but mainly just if you're going to be playing along with records, just really just focus on the beat and tap your foot. Your foot is your friend. And he would go, but tap your foot hurts. But so I can use it now. Like, in other words, if I get a student who was like me, born without a beat, then I have, at the very least, I can recognize it and say, okay, this is what you have to focus on.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's, and I've yet to do this, but if someone, I could imagine me saying to someone, okay, I'm going to have you study with this person, because this person really, really is going to focus on the beat. I don't know if that would be Ralph LaLama. Ralph's thing has always been time, And he's right.
Sure.
Or I'd find someone who I just know this, who could really know how to teach that.
But there's a component to not knowing in the first place that makes you a better teacher. Like let me put it like this. In my experience, the thing that I am best at teaching is to teach people how to physically play the trumpet. And it's because it did not come naturally to me at all.
Oh, okay.
It still is a constant struggle.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
And it's one of those things that, because I have to think about it so much, other things have come naturally to me in a way that just playing the trumpet physically has not. But that means that I now know, and I've made every mistake you can make. I mean, going through the thing when I was a kid, I was like, my teachers would tell me stuff that I tell my students now. I'd be like, yeah, I'm sure, guy. I'll work on that. Or whatever, But then I make the mistakes over and over again, and you learn it. And that's how you know how to teach, is if you've overcome those challenges.
Yeah.
I've had teachers who were amazing, amazing trumpet players who just had a knack for it, were built for it. Huge guys who can, who can play, and it's not always easy for them to convey the thing, because it's like, what's wrong with you that you can't do this in the first
what's wrong
place?
with you? You don't know how to solve this incredibly complex equation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at a certain point, you said to yourself, I'm going to be a composer or an arranger, a writer, maybe as much or more than being a saxophone player. The tricky thing I think that everybody runs into in jazz world is how do you balance out what it is that you're doing? Like, how are you going to parse out your time? Let's say, okay, I'm going to spend a certain amount of time on improvisation. I'm going to spend this much time on writing, this much time on, I don't know, whatever, trying to play shows or teaching or any number of other things. And it seems to me you always have to sacrifice something. Like if I wanted to be the best bebop trumpet player in New York, the first step is just do that for a little while. But to me, I've always struggled with that because it's not easy to do one thing and stick to it. Did you ever have to think about that? How did you think about that? Or how do you think about that now? Like the balance and time?
Well, that's never an issue for the most part. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, one thing, I hardly watch any TV except for my wife and I watch Jeopardy. We DVR it.
Yeah.
And then I'll watch, a couple news things at night.
Yeah.
And then I go to bed. But all of my time is taken arranging music for my students because I have a lot of ensembles.
Sure.
I teach, sorry about my inner burps.
Hey,
Okay.
no
Edit that
problem.
part out.
That's this is authentic, man. We're doing it.
Yeah,
for
exactly. See, I shouldn't have been drinking the seltzer. It's probably what it is.
But I'll make a point not to do that. It's
But
dangerous.
But anyway, I'm hardly ever in a situation where I've got all this free time. What do I do with it? You know, it's never
because
like
you're
that.
always coming up with new stuff.
Yeah, since I've been doing the Zappa thing, and that's been now for close to 30 years.
Sure.
Close to 30 years. More than 25, let's put it that way. Every chance I get, I arrange for the band for those shows.
Yeah, for the Iridium shows.
Yeah, for the Iridium shows.
And
now the Iridium.
And
Back
the
then it was the bottom line.
Gotcha.
Now it's the Iridium, and now we also play the Falcon.
Right.
Every chance I get to arrange is from Big Band for that. Now every now and then I get called. Christian McBride calls me to arrange something for him.
Sure.
Because he's a great arranger, but sometimes he's so successful and so busy that he can't do everything that he wants to do. So then he calls me.
Sure, yeah. And he's got a big band that works somewhat regularly.
Yeah.
How'd you get involved with that?
Okay, I was arranging music for his wife.
Okay.
And that's how I met him.
Yeah.
They weren't married at the time. They were just dating. And so he was there and he'd hear me just talking about stuff with his wife, Melissa Walker. And then he said, then we start talking about arranging. And then he hired me to do this thing at the Apollo. And then the second time he hired me was for James Brown. And there's a picture of me and James Brown.
Oh, wow.
I'll bring that down, in a second. But
wow, that's amazing.
yeah, I know Christian.
Wait, were you what was the context? Were you
Oh,
playing?
it was 3 months before he died.
You
It
were
was a
playing
Hollywood
with
Bowl.
band?
It was a Hollywood Bowl, and Christian was on the board of the Hollywood Bowl, the artistic board. So he'd come up with these concepts, and so he talked James Brown into doing the music of an album. It was James Brown on his only jazz big band record. He did a jazz big band album, and just to show you how peculiar James Brown is, the name of his jazz album was out in '69, I think it was called Soul on Top.
Okay.
So even a jazz album,
Right, yeah.
he completely misrepresents it by calling Soul on Top.
Sure.
But it was Louis Bellison was on drums, and the arranger was Oliver Nelson.
Sure.
So they couldn't find the scores to it. So they had 8 songs, and Christian transcribed, arranged 1, and I did 7.
Mm-hmm.
And so he hired me to do that, and I flew out there on my own dime just for the hang,
Right.
and so I could get that picture.
Yeah.
And
So you're sitting there in the audience while they're playing your rearrangement.
I was actually Christian wanted me to stay in the back at the very last minute just in case someone needed something,
Yeah.
I thought that was really sweet because he's next to Wynton Marsalis. He's the most successful jazz musician alive now.
Sure.
And I just thought it was really kind of sweet that that he needed me just to be there, just to make him feel a little, It
Sure,
just
yeah,
made
as
them feel
backup.
more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
comfortable, you know.
No doubt.
So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
do you
for
need me
sure.
for?
Yeah.
Anyway,
You never know on a James Brown show, man. That could go any number. You
Yeah,
might need backup at any time.
unquestionably. But once the show started, then I went out front
Sure, yeah.
to watch
That's
it.
a trip.
But anyway, but going back to okay, so hardly anyone ever hires me to do that, which is fine. Believe me, it's fine. I'd rather spend the time arranging for my big band doing these Iridium shows, and because that's the most fun I have.
Sure, yeah.
Arranging wise, that is the most fun because I know what the audience reaction is going to be.
Yeah, right.
And especially if I'm writing something funny, they're going. Then that brings more joy to my life than anything I do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got to be now. You're bringing in new arrangements or new things for every show. I mean, every show I've done with you has been, if not new tunes, and there's always something new.
Yeah.
New transitions or new
that's right.
putting tunes inside of tunes.
Yeah.
You've got to be manic about it. You got to be writing all the time. It's time consuming to do this.
It is, and it's the most. Like I said, it's the most. That's the most fun. The writing of it is the most fun. It's almost as much fun to actually do it.
Yeah. To play.
But it's the right, and I noticed this a long time ago when I was playing 7 Out in the South, when I was rehearsing the band once a week, and when I was writing all week long and doing the once every Monday night gig. The one thing I realized that as much as rewarding it is to hear the stuff, live, with a band of really good players, the really fun part is just the doing it.
Yeah.
Because that's where the creativity is.
Right. Yeah.
For a writer.
Mm-hmm. I find the exact same thing. If I can sit down, and my happiest place I find is sitting at the piano and trying to work out. To me, it's puzzles and things like that.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, well, how am I going to do this, or what are the possibilities?
Oh,
here?
totally. So, do you write too?
Yeah.
Oh man, I got to hear it.
I'll send you something.
Yeah, but I hope I'm on your list of gig.
I've been waiting for a little while because I've got a nonette based on the instrumentation from the Birth of the Cool, and we're doing an album coming out in May. So
Oh man,
I'll send it to you anyway.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But anyway, where were we?
So you're just writing for the band and putting these shows.
Yeah.
The idea process.
Oh yeah.
of sitting down to do it.
So okay. How do I find the time? That's what you asked. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I had to go teach. Is how I make a living.
Right.
But now what I've been doing lately is getting there where I teach really early. Now I don't have a degree to teach in the school system, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because I think I would go out of my mind if I had to teach kids who just
band.
where most of the kids don't want to be.
I'm
there.
with you 100%.
You know,
You couldn't have said it. Yeah.
I do have some students, since it is it's not part of the school system, so the parents are paying money for their kids to go.
Right.
Most of the kids want to be there.
Exactly. That's the big difference.
That's a
teaching
huge
little
difference.
Susie who doesn't care about it at all how to play the clarinet.
That half hour feels like an eternity.
Yeah.
For
sure.
But anyways, I get there early, and what I used to do is get there and then take a nap. But now I'm obsessed with practicing the saxophone.
Sure.
Just obsessed with it, and so that's what I do. Like yesterday, I felt like I died going to heaven because I got there in time to practice my sax for 2 hours.
Awesome.
2 hours. I mean, that was like, I never had so much, and it's really hard practice. I mean,
Yeah.
But hard practicing is so rewarding.
Yeah.
And now this is where I, if you don't mind, I would like to get into what we were discussing
it. Yeah.
before we started.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is improvisation?
Yeah.
Okay. Now
Right.
this sounds like some really prelude to some bullshit here.
We need to get down to the brass tacks.
Okay, this is what I think improvisation is for me. If this is after years and years and years of being a jazz player, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I we learn our licks. Let's say we learn licks through the I'd say like I listen the Cannonball. And if he plays a lick, I want that to be part of my vocabulary. Now, in other words, if for anyone watching this who's not a musician, there are these lines that we call licks, and some of them are so cool that you've heard the expression that songs have stood the test of time. Well, I maintain that there are licks that have stood the test of time, that they're so cool that Cannonball, Charlie Parker took from Lester Young, Cannonball took from, Charlie Parker, and then on and on and on.
Yeah.
And you probably get some real jazz musicologists that they can really go much more in depth about that. So now, is the point when you improvise to only play those licks? I say no. Okay. One of the things I'm going to try to make this tangent real short. One of the things that I'm sure you hear people talking about is, as players, is to turn off your mind when you play.
Yeah.
And just play. And just let come out. Don't even think, oh, I'm going to play this lick here. I'm going to do this here. And just let your mind go where it goes. Now, I am a big believer in that. And I used to think that I can't do that because I'm not good enough. I'm not at that level yet. And now I realize, no, you can actually start that mindset very early on. Now, we're going to go back to the learning licks.
Sure.
My thing is this, that like when I jam with someone, I'd like to just make things up, you know? I mean, I know the terrain, I know what chord tones, and if I know the chords of the song, I know the terrain. So what scales, whatever.
Yeah.
So I can start making stuff up. Now, back in my head somewhere, there's say that Cannonball lick that I may have played for the last 30 years. I don't want to make a conscious effort in my head to say, okay, I'm going to fit that in now.
Right.
No, that's just got to come on its own volition. That's going to all be part of what I guess you could call the meditative process of you're just playing, and all of a sudden, hey, that reminds me. And then it fits in.
Sure.
And otherwise, let's say you stop your thinking process, you stop, throw the lick in, and then go on with just,
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me, because I realize the thing that makes me happy as a soloist is the not thinking.
Sure.
It's the thing where, because you have to be pretty comfortable with the song. A lot of the Zappa songs we do are only one chord anyway. And I try to stay away from those type of things because that can be like just really boring, just one chord solo things. But Zappa loved playing over that, what he called landscape, where it's just one Lydian thing or whatever.
Right.
But still, and I'm sure I know that you know what I'm talking about, that you've got this vocabulary and other licks that you have, but I don't want to I just want that to be something that will through free association pops up. And never make it the thing itself.
Right. But I think if you think in those terms, you can be organic about it, and you can find your own voice in your influence.
Yeah.
Totally. What you hear all the time is people who are regurgitating licks that they've learned.
Yes.
And in my mind, it's the same as if you were to go through old speeches, if you were to go through like Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King or something like that, and then just take pieces out and then sort of piece them together into a thing, you'd be like, what is this? Sounds like a robot made this up or something like that.
No, I know.
But if you could absorb the music in the same way that you would language or something, if you read certain writers, or if, just your family or friends or whatever are going to influence the way that you speak, then it makes it a natural thing that you're playing.
Exactly.
And not,
Which is funny because I equate taking solos, improvising solos in the same way as you, like language. But I one of the things, like what I was speaking of, I equate it to more like where you're hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
And and you're comfortable and you're joking around, and all of a sudden, someone says something, and then organically your response might be something that you've another joke that you've said before.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the way that works. It's not like you've been sitting there going, "Okay, Bobby, I've been waiting all day to tell you this line."
Right. Yeah,
well, for one thing, and a lot of times that's out of context. So your lick might be out of context.
Yeah.
And so, but if I think it's great to have a big vocabulary of licks.
Yeah,
I mean, some of those licks are the reasons why we became musicians in the first place. I mean, they excited us so much,
Sure.
Now, what you were saying, okay. One of the reasons I'm really happy as being a soloist is because I have no desire, and realistically speaking, I'll never be the technician that a lot of these musicians are these days,
Sure.
Like when I hear, and that's not an insult, like the guy in my band, Ben Kono, plays tenor saxophone.
Sure.
Or Dan Glode. these guys, I'll never be that technically proficient. And both those guys are amazing players in every way, soulful and everything.
Sure.
But I have no, realistic desire to for me to even come close to that, I'd have to give up writing. I'd have to give up everything. And that's never going to happen. So
right.
I have to
and
be.
that speaks to the way that you're, you spend your time or whatever.
Yeah,
the way
exactly.
That you balance your
exactly
the
right.
art itself.
And I'm enjoying playing now that more than I've ever have because I love the quest of trying to swing.
Sure.
Trying to get that cannonball bounce.
Yeah.
And I love vocabulary, but okay, let me show you. Can I show you what I've been doing lately?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Saxophone?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, Cannonball has a solo on the Cannibal Coltrane album.
Yeah.
Cannibal in Chicago, was that originally called? I don't know if the strap is going to work. The song is called "The Sleeper," and it's one of the greatest blues solos ever. So, in it, he plays the sixth, and I love the interval of his sixth. I just love how it sounds. It's like a yodel.
Yeah.
But somewhere in here, he does something like, let's see. I'm slowing it down.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, yeah. That's not the lick.
Sure,
but that's the idea is. So I'm thinking, man, I want to make that regular part of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
And that's more of a concept than it is a lick. But
Sure.
But I have to start out with writing these lines. I don't know if you want to call them licks, but here's like. Okay. Now, that might not sound like much, but if in the context of a solo, as so I've been practicing a lot, so that in the context of a solo, hopefully, when I'm doing my not thinking thing, that might naturally, organically appear.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's the point of me doing it. And then
Right.
oh, by the way, for some reason, I only practice bebop. I only practice tunes, tunes with changes.
Okay.
2-5-1. I don't know why. There's hardly any of them in my Zappa book.
Sure. Yeah.
So what I practice has next to nothing to do with the big band. For some reason, I just love playing. As a soloist, I'd rather play over great un-American songbook tunes. But the lick I came up with, which still based on this six, which is like that.
Yeah.
I'm not playing it particularly well, but so a lot of those in that was like, see, there's your six.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And then I just follow the pattern. And when I went, I changed it a little bit just to give some kind of variety. But that's an example of the reason why I practice what I practice, because I want these things to be, and I practice everything in every key.
Yeah,
That's another
critical.
thing
Sure.
that I started doing when I first started playing jazz. I had this Patterns for Jazz book with Jerry Coker, Florida dude.
Okay.
Yeah. My brother turned me on to that book, and I used to do everything religiously. And then once I started getting more into tenor, for some reason, I was transcribing all these like Liebman and Grossman and Brecker licks that they were so hard that I decided I wasn't going to do everything in any key anymore. When I first came to New York, not only did I not have a beat, but I also refused to practice these things in 12 keys, which I think like Ralph Alama was doing.
Yeah.
And this other guy, Jerry Vamola. But when I hit the age around 50, which I'm 65 now, so 20 years ago, I finally said, you know what? I'm a scam as a player. I've got to practice everything from now on in every key.
Yeah.
And I've done it since.
Yeah.
And I find for the first time in my life when I did it, when I first started, that was like one of the drudgery things of practicing.
Right.
Now it's fun.
Yeah.
Now it's fun. And some of it's really hard to do something in F sharp that you play effortlessly in C.
Yeah.
But I figured, man, I'm a con artist if I can't play this in every key.
Right.
So I make sure I do that. Right.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to tell you how we were talking about practicing. Okay.
Yeah. Here, I'll have you get a little closer to the thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're not getting
No,
me?
probably not.
Okay. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
Oh,
no worries. No worries.
okay. Here we go. I'll put this up a little bit. Okay. Now we were talking about like I'm 65 years old, and you think by now I would have a solid way of practicing, and I feel pretty good now, just over the past week. Because here's the one thing I noticed, that when I get my horn out and I start playing, and this has been this has been the fact with me since I started playing.
Yeah.
That I play within the first minute, I will play something, just off the top of my head. I will play something I've never played before. Now, it might be something that subconsciously I heard somewhere before, but I will always play, almost every time, I will play something I've never played before, just by improvising.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Even so, only improvising over one chord or over 2-5-1 or some song.
Sure.
Right? So I'm figuring, So what that has developed now, every time I get the horn out, first thing I do is, in a medium slow tempo, is improvise over a tune. A lot of times it's all the things you are.
Yeah.
It goes through, different modulations.
Sure.
It's good for you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and then I have my music paper there, okay?
Mhm.
If I come up with something that I've never played before, then I'll write it down,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Then what I'll do is pick another song, Star Eyes, right? Play that lick over those changes. All right. Now, but I still want to make sure that I'm only improvising for the first part of a practice session. And that might be 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Then I go through the more pedantic thing of, all right, you like that lick, Ed? Fine. Now you have to run through all the keys.
Sure.
Then I run through all the keys.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I feel like I've eaten my vegetables. Fine.
Yeah.
But then I go back to improvisation and fitting of different tunes. There'll never be another you. Just a Stella.
Sure.
Lately, Woody and You's. I do that. What is this thing called Love? They have to diminish stuff for Woody and You. Woody and You is really challenging. But so all with the purpose of that this whatever lick that I've come up with will someday be such a natural thing that I do that it'll organically pop up on its own volition, and that I don't do it on purpose.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the idea of starting with improvisation, is to get yourself sort of to try to create new things that you can then use. But you're almost mining your own vocabulary from your subconscious or something from the beginning. It's almost like
that's right.
Look,
Exactly
where
right.
are my licks? Let me figure this out from my own intuition and then incorporate that into my playing more solidly.
That's exactly right. So you find the same thing? Is there anything that the way I approach things, or at least conceptually, that you either disagree with, or do you have your, or that you're thinking, well, I see what Ed says, but that's not how I go about it?
You're surprisingly close, I think, to the way that I think about this.
Yeah.
But my goal is always to be able to do anything that happens in the moment. Yeah. My primary objective improvising is to be able to respond to the current situation and to be open to spontaneous invention.
Yeah.
And I've shied away in some regard. I mean, I've done a ton of, transcriptions and figured all kinds of things out and listened to people and whatever. But the idea of taking certainly like something like a sixth and okay, let me take one pattern that might use that interval or that kind of an idea and go through all the different keys. That way, the next time that comes up or you're playing a tune, you have the ability to be spontaneous. It gives you the opportunity to say, let me create in real time. If I'm hearing something suddenly, now you subconsciously will know how to do that because you've already dealt with it in a certain way. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the end result for me wants to be, and this is, let me think about this. This has to do with just the people that I admire the most.
Yeah.
Are the people who have figured out their own voice on the instrument.
Yeah.
Which in many regards is the point of why we do this.
That's
It's
exactly
like,
right.
How is it that what's our vocabulary? How is it that we get out what we're trying to do? What's our contribution to the whole thing?
Yeah.
And so in that instance, it's like, well, how do you go about finding what it is that is uniquely yours rather than just having, the danger to me is always to just specifically regurgitate something that you've heard before in a way that is not your own.
Yeah.
It's not organic. But that's a tough thing because it's sort of a fast track to learn all the licks. If you sit down and you say, okay, I learned all the Coltrane licks, I can just play them over, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a fast way to do it. But then you may, later on in life, you may be like, am I just the guy who sounds like Coltrane now? What's my own thing? You know what I mean?
Exactly right.
But it's not an easy balance because
No,
where's the balance between, you can also do the thing. When I was at NEC, there's a I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for this. Let me see. There's an idea. NEC is a very open and kind of experimental school, and that's the reason I went there in large part because they were teaching bebop alongside free jazz and all this other stuff.
Oh.
But there's also a mentality that is like it would be easy in some instances to get so deep into originality that you lose track of any kind of discipline, and then you end up in you may lose some of the command of your instrument or command of what it is that you're trying to do or command of the harmonic vocabulary or something like that. But that's a balance. That's where you are on the spectrum. Like somebody like Albert Eiler may choose to jettison licks that people would find familiar for the benefit of trying to reach the very core of his soul as a musician. That's a choice that he would make. And on the other side of the spectrum, you'd have, I don't know, come up with anybody at the top of my head, but somebody who technically knows all the stuff, but may not have whatever.
Exactly.
And I guess that's where you fall, is how you practice to find that. But what you're talking about is a really interesting approach to it in that, you're going to say, what is it that's me in the first place? And then let's try to reinforce that in my own playing.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and I think what the reason I said I'm constantly re-examining how I practice, and because I know what my goal is, but a lot of times I'm not focused enough. Like, in other words, if I'm having fun just doing the improv part, then I'll do that maybe longer. Maybe I didn't eat my vegetables enough that day, and I think, man, come on, I needed to buckle down and get that concept in my head so it'll come out just naturally. So, but that's just me being, self-deprecating again, but there's also hey, when I say self-deprecating, at least I'm being honest about it. I'm not just saying it just to be self-deprecating.
You know your own limitations and your own strengths. I mean, that's
exactly
a sign.
Right.
It'd be better than that if you came in. If you were like, I'm good at everything. That's usually kind of dishonest.
One thing I wouldn't mind talking about, and this is all ties in, and when we listen to other players, what we like and what we don't like. Like, in other words, it's easy for me to say that I don't need that technical proficiency that these like the Weisskopfs in the world have, and Ben Kono and Dan Glode and Drew Van Den Winkels. I mean, these guys have this great, and I love how all of them play.
Sure.
I don't need that for me to be happy. I don't need it. A lot of times when I go, not those guys, but when I go hear jazz, I can't follow what people are doing because they're just playing way too many notes and not enough melody.
Sure.
In other words, let me put it this way: simple melodies. I guess playing fast are melodies. They're melodies too, but they're just fast.
Yeah.
And I find either they're playing too fast or they do this thing. Now, this is completely subjective.
Mm-hmm.
If they play outside of the changes, in a song that I feel, particularly if it's my song that I wrote pretty changes.
Yeah.
And you start fucking around and you start playing out these things that may be part of your concept, but I feel are destroying my baby that you just, you just drew a mustache on my baby, you just drew a Hitler mustache on my baby,
Sure, yeah.
particularly my own songs, then I actually get borderline angry. It's just like,
Interesting.
don't practice that stuff on my song. But even if you're
Sure.
doing a pretty song, and all of a sudden, it, if I hear someone playing really outside of the changes, and I feel it's not working,
Sure.
then, like I said, it's subjective. But part of me thinks, I want to ask them, what are you getting out of improvisation? In other words, is a successful solo to you one that you were able to force feed your out concept into this song at the expense of the song?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But hey, listen, man, I've heard this thing we're talking about playing out. I've heard music players I really love do that, and I think to myself, Ed, maybe I'm. It's something wrong with me. I can't,
Yeah, well, everybody's going to interpret the music in a different
Yeah,
way. Or everybody's going
exactly.
to appreciate certain things. But like, let's say you took like a Woody Shaw or something like that.
Yeah.
He could play a beautiful tune and play out on it, and it has like an exciting. It gives it a
yeah.
certain level to it.
I've never heard Woody offend me that way.
Yeah. So maybe that has to do with just the approach to doing it.
Yeah.
Like there may be, but it may also be. It may speak to the point of like it could be contrived. Like that is to say, you may find that somebody's playing out just to play out, just for the achievement of maximum hipness, to the expense of at the expense of the music itself. Whereas you could use the same techniques and you could be doing something that really, like maybe another. I'm trying to think of examples where you could say that's beautiful, but also really wild. And maybe it is like late Coltrane stuff when he's playing. I guess it depends on the era, but you could see like, okay, this is a melody and it's a beautiful melody, but it's being played timbrally out or something like that, but it still works because it conveys the message.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's really about conveying the message. If you're playing a ballad and all of a sudden you're playing, you have to have a reason for playing some kind of a wild thing, and maybe that's the experience of the time, but it would probably depend on the circumstance.
Sometimes I feel, we'll go back to the thing about playing the too many notes thing. Well, first off, that's even subjective too. Playing, I mean,
Sure, but I can understand. Understand it.
There used to be a thing that the old timers, like in Chicago, would say. I guess in a way to get me to stop playing so many notes, they would say, if you can't sing it, then you shouldn't play it. Yeah, well, if that's the case, then you just never listen to Coltrane at all. Are you gonna sing his solo on Good Bait?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So this is like, I suppose you could, but the thing is, and I want to be one of those old fogey guys that would say something like that, because like Mike Brecker's taken solos that were blindingly fast, and I love him to death. So but I just find a lot of times when players play so much, I just think to myself, what are you getting out of this? Are you getting? Is this an OCD thing for you that you have to fit this many notes in to this solo?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, no, then the answer probably usually is no. Ed, you're the asshole here. You're the guy you're the guy who just can't understand it. You know?
Right. Yeah. Well,
maybe not say asshole, but maybe Ed, you're maybe my attention span isn't great, or maybe I'm not loose enough as conceptually to be able to just sit there and just take it all in. That very well could be, but regardless of OCD or not, it really does. It completely goes to what you enjoy hearing in a jazz soloist.
Yeah. Yes, and that's fair. And there are certain things that when I started listening to them, I probably found them. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if this is going to speak to this exactly, but when I was a kid, I got a friend of mine's mother gave me Bitches Brew on vinyl. And I came and I wiped the dust off my dad's record player and I put it on and I listened to it. And the first time I heard it, I was like, this is bananas. What even is this music, And then the more I listened to it, the more I was like, there's some really cool stuff. But I had to be able to hear that. It's the same thing when I first heard bebop. When I first heard Night in Tunisia when I was in 9th grade or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know if I can figure out what this melody is. And then the more you listen to it, the more your ears, become accustomed to that kind of thing.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, I do think that I think jazz music in general may have gotten down the road of technical proficiency, disregarding what are you trying to do for the song itself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're serving the music. So if you have the opportunity to play some crazy thing, but the music doesn't want it, that's a little maybe metaphysical or something, but there's an element to it that is like you're contributing to the conversation. It's the same thing if you had, I mean, let's maybe do an analogy here. If you had a conversation, if you were in a conversation with 3 or 4 other people, that move where you say, oh, I've been waiting to tell this joke this whole time.
Yeah, right.
Now's my chance. And you throw it in there, they'd be like, that's not even relevant to what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but in any context, there may be a time where you're like, you know, insane baby mustache Hitler joke or something like that. It's exactly what is appropriate given the circumstance. You know what I mean? You never know.
No, it's true. You never know. That's right.
The outness may be appropriate, but it is about like, all right, well, what are we doing to contribute to the music itself rather than what are we doing to make sure everybody knows how cool I am?
Yeah.
You know, while we're in the middle of this.
I don't know. It's probably this whole conversation is something that will never have an actual answer, but that's fine. That's
it.
That's what jazz is anyway. It's, you know, you never mastered this. You know,
and that's the beauty of it in many regards.
Exactly right. You know, so that is the, you know, it's the adventure is the reward.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that may be exactly right. Yeah. Okay, it'd be sinful if I didn't cover before we get out of here. When did you start doing the Zappa music, or when were you?
Oh, okay.
When did you become familiar with Zappa's music?
Okay. Zappa, when I was in high school, I was mainly a Beatles guy because I'm so old that I was in 4th grade when the Beatles came out. And just a quick aside, I always like to say, because it always makes me smile inside, is that when I was in the 4th grade, I was 10 years old, and the 2 things that happened in 1964 that year that was the most exciting thing ever was the Beatles and a guy named Cassius Clay.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Who became Muhammad Ali. Both of, you know, he beat Sonny Liston, and the Beatles came out. And there are actually pictures of them together, the Beatles and
is that right?
Cassius Clay. Yeah. Back when he was Cassius Clay.
Sure.
So that was an astoundingly exciting time. But anyway, so I was a big Beatles guy, but then as the years went on, this type of music that used to be called underground music came out. And it was a lot of it was based on the Beatles, but they were like bands that were playing small clubs, but they were selling good amount of albums. And it was called underground music. And that was like, you know, Frank Zappa's Mother's Invention.
Mm-hmm.
You had Jefferson Airplane, you had The Who, and, you know, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, but one of the guys was Frank Zappa. So my brother Nick, again, he always brought the great music in the house. He brought in a Zappa album, and I think, hey, this is pretty funny, you know. But I also noticed even with the funny stuff that he put in the albums, underneath the funny stuff was some really beautiful music. It was like almost like Zappa was testing you to see if you could go beyond whatever silly thing he put on top or ugly thing he put on top, and see this incredibly beautiful music underneath. But then I went to see him live, and that changed the whole game. Every time my band plays, there's some element that is inspired by the first time I saw Zappa.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was in 9th grade at that point.
Oh,
so
man,
then
that's got to be a trip.
Oh. It was unbelievable. It was a great time. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh man, you know, like I guess any phase that you grew up in is going to be, you know, you're going to see it as the best time in music." But people in the 40s and 50s, you know, whatever, you know, with big bands, you know, and with Louis Armstrong back in the 20s and 30s. But anyway, mine was the 60s. I was born in 54, but when you start really getting into music, it's from like the age of 5 on, right?
Yeah.
You're like a sponge. You're hearing all this stuff. Well, and that's basically what that's what my big band is about now. Is you know, even though we're really eclectic, we do a lot of different eras. I'd say the majority of it is that time period.
Sure. Yeah.
It's mid 60s to early 70s. So anyway, so I was buying all Zappa's albums, and I just wanted to be him. I mean, I thought he was like the greatest, and he's still my favorite.
Yeah.
Still my favorite composer. So, but when I got to college, even though I was still buying his albums and a couple other pop people that I was still really into, like Todd Rundgren and Edgar Winter, Stevie Wonder, still buying that stuff. But I had really become a bebop Nazi. I would just like, you know, only getting to Phil Wood's albums and whoever,
Yeah.
and then of course when I saw Elvin Jones, then that's when the big influence came from Liebman and Grossman and Mike Brecker, but I was really at that point only focusing on playing the tenor saxophone, first alto, then tenor,
Yeah.
right? But I still buying Zappa's albums. And then when I started arranging, when I got to New York, I was still listening. I stopped buying Zappa's albums, but I was starting to write my own music and blah, 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 blah. So what happened was, I think I had heard that Zappa had gotten ill. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to write some Zappa songs for my big band. At that point, I didn't arrange any Zappa songs, believe it or not.
Sure.
My first 100 songs, the charts, at least 100 charts, and not one Zappa song. So I wrote a couple of Zappa things. Then I found out he was really, really sick, and then he eventually died. And that's when I said, well, okay, you know what? I was playing once a month at a club called the Bitter End. You played there yet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was playing once a month there. I go, you know what? I'm going to write a bunch of stuff, and one of these Mondays we're just going to do an all Zappa show. And what happened was, now, prior to us doing that, it was hit or miss whether anyone would ever show up to my gigs or not.
Okay.
Sometimes we'd have some people. Sometimes the band outnumbered the audience.
Yeah. Now this is the whole doing weekly gigs since the end or whatever. I mean, you get some people or
when I was doing the weekly gig at 7 out of the South, this is even way past this. This is early 90s. This is like 93.
Yeah.
And I was doing those weekly the weekly gigs at 7 out of the South in the early 80s.
Okay.
So anyway, good at least 10 years, had in that time. And in that time I was, just playing little gigs here and there with my band. Nothing fabulous.
No steady things.
Career going nowhere. So anyway, I was getting ready to do one of these monthly gigs at the Bitter End, and this is right when the internet really started, as far as everyone using it. That's when it would become ubiquitous, where everyone was,
Yeah.
And there were bulletin boards at that time. I don't know if you were too young to
Online.
know online bulletin boards.
Yeah.
I don't even think they call it that anymore.
No,
now they're just Facebook
message boards and things like that.
whatever.
Yeah, they exist.
So I put on. I had what is it? My ISP was Prodigy. I don't even know if they even have that.
I don't know.
Whatever.
I don't know.
So anyway, the word gets out all over the country. Now, the Zappa had just died in December.
Okay.
And we have our concert. My first thing doing Zappa is set for June. So maybe a month before that, the word gets out. The big band by this unknown guy named Ed Palermo is going to doing the music of Frank Zappa. The Zappa fans were so hungry that when we got there, the place was packed, just packed. I'd never experienced that before, ever. Even when we were at 7th Avenue South, and they were just drawn, the club was just drawn because of the heavyweights that played there, but besides us, you know.
Yeah.
But I never experienced this before. So, and the audience went crazy. I found that people drove down from Canada, drove up from Florida,
Really?
and they had no idea who I was. All they knew was a New York band was going to play the music of Frank Zappa, and I thought, wow, this could go places. I hooked up with a bigger club, the Bottom Line, and then long story short, we played there every couple months, and now I'm rehearsing every week. So during that time, at the time, to make a living, I was just playing my weekend club dates, but I was also arranging, doing like Sinatra transcriptions for these society bands.
Mm-hmm.
So, but during that whole 9-year stretch, I was writing Zappa, nothing but Zappa. Charts.
Sure.
Oh, boom, 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 boom. I wanted to make sure every show was different than the last.
Yeah.
And it's for 9 years. So that's why I've got well over 300 Zappa tunes.
Wow.
In my computer.
Sure.
So
now
that should answer your question about that answers the how I got into Zappa and yeah.
Yeah. So then you did an album of Zappa's music.
Yeah, in 1997.
And then you got in trouble with the
Zappa
estate.
Yeah.
What happened? Can you tell me what happened?
Yeah,
on
sure.
that?
I can tell you what happened. Mainly because Gail had passed away. Gail was the widow, and when Frank died, instead of being heartened by fans who wanted to play his music, because Frank did say at one point, "I just want people to play my music."
Right.
She saw everything as copyright infringement. She wanted to have the power to say, "No, you can't do that concert."
Right.
You used to show me what songs you're doing because I have to make sure that this falls under the category of songs that you're allowed to play.
Yeah.
Which is pretty
That's,
arbitrary.
to me, yeah.
No.
All that to me is insane.
Yeah, it's insane.
But she even did it to Dweezil.
Yes, you did. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's as wild as it gets.
Yeah,
But isn't that the point? Is you want the people to hear the music. You want to get the music to the people.
That's why I do it. I mean, the thing is, there's never any chart I work on where I'm not thinking the audience. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. I like having a receptive audience,
Sure.
and I love people. My biggest compliment is when these Zappa diehards say, "Thank you for keeping the music alive."
Yeah, that's exactly what you want.
It's like that's it.
Yeah.
That's all the validation I need.
Sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, that is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
That just hearing those words.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But basically she was like writing me cease and desist letters and stuff. She never pulled the trigger, never actually did sue, but she would send the cease and desist letters. And
Yeah.
that went on for the whole time I was doing his music.
But you can't. Well, that's got to be daunting to sit there and try to do the stuff and have his widow telling you
Oh,
not
yeah.
to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's discourage as hell to try to go through this
Well,
stuff.
more than you know. I mean, at one point, I had never been sued before.
Yeah.
So she started on her threats right after the first time I played the Bottom Line.
Uh-huh.
The Bottom Line, the first time I played there was packed, super packed for early show and late show. Again, those people who were there had heard how great the Bitter End thing was. And once again, it got on the internet, on bulletin boards.
Yeah.
And people from all over came. It was, and it was through that experience, that first experience, that the guy, the owner of the Bottom Line said, let's make a regular thing out of this. But it was right before the next concert, which is going to happen like in December, where she found out about it. She had her lawyer call me and basically threatened me, saying, anyway, it scared me so much that it triggered what became a panic disorder.
Really?
Of which I am on still medication to this day.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that, I don't blame them for that. What I have is a chemical imbalance. You realize how many people have this? I mean, like,
Sure.
and thank God, all I need is this little pink pill of Paxil, 20 milligrams, and I'm cool. It set me straight. I've tried to get off it every now and then, but big mistake. It's just, I get these panic. I don't get them when I'm on the medication, but without it, I have these panic attacks where
Sure.
I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm shaking too much.
Uh-huh.
I can't sleep. I can't eat.
But it started with that.
It started with that.
Wow, that is wild.
Yeah,
huh?
it was really wild, and was crazy because I was getting ready, writing new stuff for the next Zappa show because I'm so excited, right? And then all of a sudden, I realized I can't do it because all I can do is pace this new carpet now, but
Yeah.
all I would do is pace up, back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was in conjunction with, and no one ever talks about this, when panic disorder becomes entwined with depression.
Uh-huh.
Usually people talk about it's one or the other,
Yeah.
but mine was a combination of both. I'd just be, when you have panic attack, your adrenaline goes crazy, but in a bad way.
Right.
It's
Sure.
not like, all right, rhythm section's popping, my solo's coming.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful adrenaline.
Right.
This adrenaline works against you.
Sure.
It just exhausts you, and then you're lying here and you're completely, but not good tired, because you're lying here and you're dead, but your heart's still pounding at 1,000,000 miles.
Yeah.
So it's like, the way I explain a panic attack is just like a pit bull is chasing you, but there's no pit bull.
Right. Okay.
But you have that fear.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's, anyway, but it's that triggered that. That
Wow.
triggered that. But so,
Yeah.
like I said, it probably would have happened anyway, But
that was the yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more than you can. Yeah,
fortunately, it took 2 weeks for the pill to start the pills to start working.
sure.
And those 2 weeks were the worst weeks of my life. I didn't know how I was going to survive it.
Oh wow.
But when it started working, and then I went, oh man, I can hold a pencil. Because at that time I think I was still writing the scores by hand. So then I got back to work.
Yeah.
I still had 2 more weeks before the next gig. And so next Zappa gig. I was still doing club dates, miserable as hell. I still made myself get up and do them. But anyway, yeah, so that's what that's about.
Sure. Now, but she couldn't. I mean, you can play the music regardless. That's not an infringement in copyright. If you're selling it, it's a different thing. Or if you're not paying them for it. But is there a way? I mean, they can't really sue you just for playing the music live.
You can sue anyone for anything,
but
whether it's going to hold up in court or
yeah,
not.
that's a different. Sure. Okay. Fair point.
Which
fair
is,
point.
I think, one of the reasons why her thing was like, there's this great guitarist and composer named Mike Keneally, and Mike, he's played with us before, but he used to play with Zappa. He was like one of Zappa's favorite musicians, just astounding musician. He put it the best. He goes, she just likes to be a looming presence.
Interesting. Okay.
So she passed away, ironically, from lung cancer. She had stopped smoking years before, but a lot of people think it's because of Frank who didn't die of lung cancer. He died of prostate cancer.
Right.
But he was a chain smoker.
Yeah.
And so you wonder whether it was his secondhand smoke that killed her.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
But no, ever since she died, I haven't heard anything. A couple of the kids now do the estate, and they see us, rightfully so, as small bananas. You know.
But hopefully people would be on the side of having the music played, because the music takes on a life of its own.
Oh yeah,
it lives beyond the people. Like, you can't stop that from, and you want people to hear it. I mean, that's the point.
Totally.
Why you spend so much time writing the music? Why wouldn't you want people to hear it?
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, I tell you, the way it's always worked for me since I've been doing this band is that I do the band for like 3 years. I get burnt out. I go a year, maybe 2 years without doing the band, and then I start the band up again. Burn out on just because of the lack of interest, you know. So that's happened a few times, but ever since I started doing the Zappa, I haven't burned out once.
Wow.
And it's a zillion times more hours I'm putting into it.
Yeah.
But I've always put a lot of hours in. But the reason why is because I have an audience. That is the reason.
Sure. Yeah.
I have an audience. I mean, the music itself is great. But the reason why I haven't burned out on it is because there's a reason now to be doing it.
Right.
You know?
Sure, yeah, because people are going to show up.
People are going to show up.
And that actually, I was going to ask, because it's so hard to, the time and effort involved in running a big band is often a thankless job, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is if you know that people are going to show up, it's going to drive you to continue to do it.
Totally.
I mean, there's got to be more to it than that as well, but certainly having that as a foundation is like, people want to hear, you want people to hear the music.
Unquestionably.
And every time I've been to the Iridium as an audience member or whatever, or the Falcon, it's packed. It's packed every time.
We've always heard, all of us always heard when we started this thing, you got to develop a following.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder than it seems.
Oh, yeah.
And let's face it, man, if it wasn't for Zappa, I wouldn't have an audience, you know. Fortunately, my audience has been enjoying the band so much that I can actually do very little Zappa, and they're going to still be, still going to go, and they're still going to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, so that's good.
Well, I'll tell you, the other thing is you got to have the most, let's say, madcap, entertaining show of any big band in New York, maybe.
Yeah.
Possibly the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd stand up there wearing a pig mask, playing the thing.
Yes.
I mean, there's, whatever. The last time, what were you doing? You were Snowflake and Lucy. I never know what to expect from I Love Lucy or whatever.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you're enjoying it. I know the audience does. It's that has really grown over time, and the Falcon is the main reason for that, because I learned early on the Falcon, well, I can put on like a little show here. You know,
sure.
I don't even remember what inspired it, but like one of the first concepts we did a Wizard of Oz parody.
Uh-huh.
Oh, of course, Zappa music being the main thing, but we did that story or fucked up the story somehow.
Sure.
And then we did probably what Drew Vanderwinkle thinks is the best show we did. I think so too. We did a cowboy show where we had a storyline that went through both sets. And because not only was it silly, it actually had a soul to it. Actually, the character I played was getting the electric chair, and we had people in the audience go, "No, don't do it, don't do it." And they were really emotionally involved. And I thought, "Oh, this is the best thing." But that was a ton of work.
Sure.
Because I just like in the same way, like I was mentioning, like Zappa's music, he liked it right. Like his sometimes arrangements would have ugly stuff on top, where underneath this astoundingly soulful, beautiful music. I think he was testing his audience, just seeing who could see beyond that.
Yeah.
In a sense, my shows are like that. If you can hear this incredible music that's beneath the veneer of the silly stuff that I bring to it, because Zappa had a big thing. Zappa, I think, was kind of defensive about the fact he did funny stuff too with his music, and he had this album called "Does Humor Belong in Music?"
Right. Yeah.
My answer to that is, of course, it does.
Sure.
Everything.
Yeah. Everything belongs. Yeah.
Every aspect of life. If you can make it something that people want to see and can relate to and laugh at, and why wouldn't you put that into the show?
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times someone said something at a rehearsal where I just said, "Oh, that goes in the show." That's really, or someone said something and like, "Oh, well, that's the album cover of the next album."
Right.
Or no, that's our next Falcon theme. If I have any talent at all is being able to hear or see something that makes me think, I want to use that.
Yeah.
And not ignoring it.
Sure.
Which I think, and believe me, I don't want anyone else, the big band to be as silly as us. It makes us more unique.
Sure.
But I think if there's one thing that musicians don't do is notice that there are external things that happen that they could very well use.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think that kind of, I wonder sometimes if in jazz in general we've strayed too far from entertaining people at all.
Yeah,
I mean, it's art music for sure, and I think that's the foundation. But Dizzy Gillespie was a genius, and he's standing up there. I mean, he could go back and forth between playing the most beautiful, genius stuff imaginable.
That's right.
And then also be able, stand there and
be astoundingly funny.
Yeah.
I used to see Dizzy a lot when I was in college, and man, I remember one time it was in the summer. It was Charlie Parker week, and so he was talking to the audience, just about the history, but in the funniest way, not pedantic or academic at all, just the funniest way. And he started talking about the great trumpet players, innovative trumpet players.
Yeah.
He's like Freddie Hubbard, and he's mentioned Roy Eldridge, Clifford Brown, and someone yells up, "Don Cherry," and Dizzy goes, and then someone Dizzy goes, "Well, I'm more talking about." And then someone yells up, this black dude yells up, You're talking about the innovators, not the imitators." And Dizzy goes, "Inna." In other words, short for innovators.
Yeah.
But the way he said it, "Inna," just to affirm that the guy was right, but in saying innovators, it was just so funny.
Sure.
It was so funny and so quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet him? You're too young for that, right?
No, yeah. He died in 1992.
Yeah.
Maybe. I would have been 5.
Yeah,
Yes, but unfortunately, I didn't get to meet him.
He used to come to hear Tito. From time to time. But I got to meet him. I met him twice, and then the second time I met him, I reminded him of the first time that we met, and he said he remembered. I know he didn't, but he was just a gentleman.
Sure.
He was just a
Yeah.
gentleman. But you're right. I mean, but not everyone is meant to be a front person, and most jazz people, I think, aren't very good at, I don't expect them to be a clown, but at least be loose enough just to engage the audience a little bit,
Sure.
But
everybody operates differently and they've got their own thing, but I do appreciate, and it sounds to me like there's the danger, let me put it like this. you could think about it as being okay, well, we don't want the silliness to take away from the music. But in my mind, seeing it enhances what it is that you're doing. It's just another component. And that's something that I learned a long time ago is you think about music as being happy or sad or triumphant, but there's no reason it can't be funny or there's no reason it can't be quirky in one way or another or how, encompass everything in the human condition. And part of that can be, whatever.
Yeah.
All kinds of wild... the wild show element of the whole thing.
Yeah. I remember once I seen Richie Byrek playing at 7th African South, and he's fantastic. But he's playing this incredibly serious music. It was just hard to get through.
Sure.
And then during the break, I see him flirting with like a waitress. I'm thinking, well, how come I didn't hear any of that in your music?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
So let's let us hear.
So what do you think?
Yeah,
you got enough.
We got it. We did it.
To edit out.
It. Yeah. We'll piece it together.
The cutting room floor.
No, yeah, right, of course. Yeah. So as a last thing, you play every month at the Iridium. When people hear this, they know where to find you. Every month at the Iridium and every month at the Falcon in Marlborough.
And the show's appreciably different every time out.
Completely different and wild. Like nothing you've ever seen.
That's exactly right.
All right, thanks a lot, Ed.
You got it, Bobby Spellman.
Thanks a lot.